Most discussions on human rights begin with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The statements in the UDHR, and other statements about human rights, are moral claims that are applied, because we are humans. These claims are articulated into legal rights, through law-creating processes. The UDHR is not legally binding. Therefore, we need to recognize the difference between a declaration, and a covenant, or convention. A declaration is a document whose authors express their agreement with stated aims, objectives, and principles. The content of a declaration constitutes moral obligation, but it is not legally binding. A covenant is an agreement between states, a form of treaty. It is binding only on the states that have agreed to be bound by it. That is, those states that have signed and ratified the covenant. States may also add additional caveats and clauses or reservations, which simply means that they are not necessarily bound by the principles with which they disagree. The concept, pacta sunt servanda, is central to international legal order. It refers to the legal idea that states must observe in good faith the treaties to which they are parties. It is the state's responsibility to uphold the agreements. Human rights exist along a spectrum. At one end is universalism, and at the other end relativism. On one end of the spectrum is radical relativism, which claims that culture, history, economics, etc., are the sources of all values. On the other end is radical universalism, which is the idea that all values, including human rights, are completely universal, and they are not subject to any modification due to historical or cultural factors. In between are strong relativism and weak relativism. There are numerous human rights treaties and covenants. Two covenants in particular lay the foundation for the legality of human rights. These are the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, or the ICCPR, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, or the ICESCR, and associated amendments. If a state has ratified either of these covenants, the state is legally obliged to uphold the statutes within. These covenants, together with the UDHR, form what is known as the International Bill of Human Rights. We are faced with a quandary. What should the international community do if states blatantly violate human rights laws, such as Myanmar, and the Rohingya, or the CCP's treatment of the Uyghur in China's West? Moralists would usually argue that other states have to intervene. Radicalism, on the other hand, would argue that the crises should not be centered on ethnic tensions, extremist religions, or tribal rivalries, but on the inequitable distribution of resources brought about by neoliberalism and a post-colonial state. Intervention is a difficult problem. To do nothing may be equally as problematic. The Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, Article 8 states,
"Any contracting party may call upon the competent organs of the United Nations to take such action under the Charter as they consider appropriate for the prevention and suppression of acts of genocide or any of the other acts enumerated in Article 3.
This suggests that intervention is an option for states. We will consider genocide, IHL, R2P and human security in the third summary video for this chapter.
This has been a PyCubed production.